Good afternoon, everyone. We will be proceeding with our second session. So I request everyone to be seated and keep your mobile on silence or airplane mode. Thank you. I hope you all had a hearty meal, a hearty lunch. So let's begin with the second session. Presentation on neuroscience, Indian psychology, and Western psychology. I'm Sering Thandup, IT and Multimedia Coordinator of Tibet House. Now I would like to welcome our chairperson, Mrs. Madhuri Menon of BAM Academy. Due to the shortage of time, I will be skipping her elaborate introduction. And so I would also request all the speakers, Dr. Vibha Sharma, Dr. Kiran Kumarji, Ms. Parisha Jijini, Ms. Parisha Jijina, and Mr. Anand Chobrask. So I will hand over to chairperson. So please, thank you.
Hello. So speakers, I think this is an added challenge because what we in training call the graveyard shift. Just after lunch, everybody's on a full stomach, and some people are rearing to go. Others are wondering, oh, okay, when can I go off to sleep? So I welcome the panel. It's with great pleasure that we have this cross section of people across who are going to be viewing neurosciences and of course, Eastern and Western philosophy in a different context altogether. So, our first speaker, Dr. Vibha Sharma, she's in PhD MPhil in clinical psychology and is currently associate professor at the Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences, the IBHAS, and at Delhi, and with more than 20 years' experience in the field. Her major achievements include 4 awards from various associations, more than 60 publications in national and international journals, an edited book on clinical neuropsychology, and around 15 chapters in reference books. She has been invited to as resource person in around 200 seminars, conferences, etc., and presented more than 50 papers in national and international conferences and seminars, including annual conference of British Psychological Society at London. She has also been invited for guest lectures. She is a member of 15 scientific bodies and a member of the editorial board in 3 national journals. She has supervised 5 awareness programs in the community, and her areas of special interest are neuropsychology, adolescents and adult mental health issues, women mental health, positive spiritual psychology, and research methods. Over to Dr. Sharma. Before she starts, I think let me just add that we're already a little behind time, so I'm going to have the not so pleasant task of telling you all when it's time up. So what kind of signal would you like?
Thank you so much, Dr. Menon, for the pleasant introduction. A very good afternoon to all respected persons on the dais and off the dais. I can see very distinguished guests here. It's really, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to interact in this forum full of intellectuals. Today, I'm going to talk about brain and behavior relationships, as it has been thought about this particular panel to talk about neuroscientific basis of mental health, well-being, and of course behavior, and of course having Eastern and Western perspectives. So I have chosen my topic as brain and mind relationship with cultural perspective also. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about how like the concept of brain and mind relationship has emerged, what is basic, very brief about the brain and the connectivities, how there are different point of views, how like brain governs different type of behaviors, then of course a little bit cultural perspectives. So we all know that seat of the mind is in brain. Till date, what we know, it may change in future. Now, so till date, what we know that the seat of the mind is in brain, and over the centuries, philosophical thoughts, medical practices, and religious dogma have tried to understand about the brain. So, if we see throughout the history, two things which arouse so much curiosity among the human beings are, one is the universe and other is the universe inside us, universe outside and universe inside. And major part of the universe inside is the brain, if we try to understand, because if we call it mind, we know heart has its different function. Previously we used to call heart, but we know that somewhere the mind also exists inside the body and probably inside the brain. So various functions what make us human beings are governed by the brain. So what makes us different as human beings is probably the difference of brain, the development of brain over the eras, over the centuries. So questions like where we came from, where we are, have always been there, and we were always trying to understand the mind body relationships. When it comes to mental health, it's become much more relevant to understand about mental health and mental well-being. So going quickly on the history, initially the research focused on studying brain through diseases which highlighted brain as a source of all mechanism. In middle ages, focus was shifted from to the analytical and physiological, anatomical and physiological mechanism of the brain. And in between we have heard that there were bodily humors which were decided as having a major role, as in our Indian ancient thought. Also in Ayurveda we see Vayu, Pitta, Kapha, Dosh. So these were the bodily humor. It was prevalent in Western society, also in Eastern societies also. But till 18th century, various contributions had been made to emphasize the role of brain in behavior, be it through pineal gland, size of brain, or role of corpus callosum. In early 19th century, an era of localization theories emerged, which highlighted that each behavior is guided by one area in brain. So it was mainly Broca's work, if we all know, that he said that okay, this particular area is related to this particular function of the body or of the whole. He has tried to define the with various mechanisms and various functions of human being through different areas of the brain. But this also, Wernicke also gave particular areas for his speech, but these works were also criticized. And then like Freud also tried to explain, because basically Freud was also neurologist, so he also tried and he criticized this concept, and he also did some significant discoveries in the area of brain behavior relationships, though he was never known for this, rather he was known much for his psychoanalytic theories. So there were some like works in 19th to 20th century. Focus shifted from understanding anatomy to more of functionality or functions of the brain. And in this we know there were some main researchers, but the major name is of Alexander Luria, who formulated the concept of functional systems of behavior and proposed the concept of neuroplasticity. So till date what we follow is mainly the neuroplasticity concept, and it helps us in understanding different behaviors, and especially after some lesions, after injuries, how the other areas of brain can take up the functions of nearby areas. Because till the time we were understanding it through anatomically, that only particular area of the brain is related to a particular function. But through studies it has been seen that even if that particular area is damaged due to any injury or illness, then the other areas take up the functions after practice. So this theory has been developed by Luria, and it is known as neuroplasticity. So this made understanding of brain behavior relationship much clearer, wherein our behaviors may be impacted by any altercation in brain. So in 21st century, tremendous work in understanding these relationships is still going on with the help of various physiological and psychological principles. So coming to the brain, I hope all of us are aware. So just uh, giving just a brief concept. So brain is, as we know, is an amazing organ, and it controls memory, learning, all the other higher cognitive functions which make us human beings. So the various sense organs, hearing, sight, smell, taste, and of course emotions. So it controls all the body parts, our movements, all the different functions, and including muscles, organs, blood vessels, every function, various functions are controlled by the brain. It is a very complex structure. It contains billions of nerve cells and, of course, trillions of connections among those nerve cells. So we know these nerve cells are known as neurons, and these neurons communicate through electrical signals, special chemicals which are known as neurotransmitters, and they help move these electrical messages from one neuron to other neurons. So they make circuits basically. So this is just a basic picture of brain. We all know the major four lobes of cerebral cortex: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. So information is fed through brain through our sense organs. So information is given to the brain through sense organs. It travels through sensory neurons. It reaches to the brain, where the brain, particular areas of brain decide what to do, and the information comes back through the motor neurons. And there are like connecting neurons which are known as interneurons. So that's how like whole connection between brain and behavior is made. Uh, there are different type of neurons. There are different type of chemical neurotransmitters. We know researchers who are studying mental illnesses believe that abnormalities in how particular brain circuits function contribute to the development of many mental illnesses. So previously, as it was thought that a particular area is related with a particular kind of mental illness, now the theories are that changes in particular neurochemicals which make changes in the circuits of information, so that the way a particular information should be processed in brain is not being processed because of some defect in the neurotransmitters, neurochemicals, or which breaks the circuit in the brain. Which particular circuit is broken causes a certain set of symptoms which create a different kind of mental illnesses or mental problems. So this is the current understanding of uh, understanding the mental illnesses or different behaviors through brain and brain connections. So connections between nerve cells along certain pathways or circuits in the brain can lead to problems with how the brain processes information and may result in abnormal mood, thinking, perception, or behavior. This is just I liked it. This kind of diagram has been made by an Australian professor, Fornito. So it shows like how many connections a brain may have. As I said, there are billions of neurons and there are trillions of connections. Till date, like it's very difficult for all of us. A very genius person also utilizes a very small part of the brain. And what we talk in Eastern practices, like how meditation helps. Now there are studies of fMRI and other neurophysiological studies which has proven that during meditation or during like deep relaxation, various new connections are made. So various circuits are new circuits develop. That's how they enhance the capacity of brain and result in different positive behaviors. So the number of how many numbers are there, it will decided by the different behavior. So it has a like kind of a circular relationship. When you learn a new behavior, new circuits are made, and when new circuits are made, they affect the different type of behaviors. So that's how it is said that up to the elderly age, one should try to learn new and new things, new and new skills, so that new circuits are developed in the brain, and there is no limit. A person cannot utilize the potential of brain. Only like it is said that only 10 to 15, hardly 15% of brain is utilized even by genius person. It is usually 12, 13 kind of percentage. So we have huge potential through the various connections. So how it affects the mental well-being, as I was talking about, it's the source of all our thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Our brains are also dauntingly complex, containing billions of cells and trillions of fibers. Disruption or damage to the web of connections in our brains can result in any number of conditions, including Alzheimer's, or like mental health disorders like schizophrenia, mood disorders, or any other disorders. So, establishing a comprehensive map of the web of connections within our brain, a blueprint of the brain circuitry, is the ultimate goal in trying to better understand what causes these disorders and how we might better treat them. Uh, so, when we talk about brain and mental well being, your brain's health is directly related with the mental health or mental well-being. Mental well-being is not like at in current times, it's not synonymously defined as mental health. Mental well-being is something more than mental health. Mental well-being is basically people's experiences of feeling good, functioning well, and coping adequately with life circumstances and challenges. So even if a person is suffering with any kind of mental disorder or any physical disorder, it doesn't mean that this person cannot have a good physical and mental well-being. So concept of well-being, we all know that is different, and it is much more prevalent nowadays. So it's important to note that science behind how mental well-being is connected with brain health is not very well developed till now, but still the works are going on in this area. While the available evidence suggests a relationship between better mental well-being and better brain health, we are not able to definitely determine if one causes the other. So it reminds me that recently we are working on a concept of cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve of the brain means that even after the age of 60 or 70, when the brain's health is assumed to be declining, how much cognitive reserve a person has, and it can be enhanced through various skills, new learning, new skills. So if a person has a good cognitive reserve, even after the brain or the body uh, gets like aging, still his mental well-being, his physical well-being will be much better than the other persons who do not have a good cognitive reserve. And your cognitive reserve is affected by not only by your brain activities or physical activities, means through exercise, also through social relationships, how you are effective in your interpersonal relationship. Everything affects the cognitive reserve. So uh, there are just some how to improve. In the first session we have already heard so many things about how to improve your mental well-being. It is just 5 tips. Move, like you have to go here and there, discover yourself every day, some new activities, new learnings. Relax. Move also means the exercise part. You need to relax, take 7 to 8 hours of sleep every day and relax, and do your works in a relaxed manner. Connect with people and nourish. Your nourishment, your food is very important. One should get a healthy food habits. So coming in very brief, I think I have taken already 15 minutes. I have 2 3 minutes for 3 4 minutes more. So how like culture affects brain. So there is again a new, it's not very new, but it's comparatively newer area of science. It is known as cultural neuroscience. So how like culture is affecting the brain, and in turn how brain is affecting different cultures. So what we feel that brain may be similar for all the human beings, no. Development of brain is very much affected by the culture in which the brain is developed, or in which culture the brain is developing for many years, because the habits, the language, the different kind of sensory inputs you get, everything is determined by the culture. And during the development years especially, what kind of a culture a person is living, it definitely affects the brain. And so we see that outside affects the inside. So cultural neurosciences examine the neural evidence for socio-cultural influences on thinking, judgment, and behavior. Both the structure and function of human brain throughout its development are shaped by the environment. Social environment in turn is shaped by culture. The main goal of this emerging young field is to understand how culture, which is comprised of behaviors, values, symbols, meaning systems, communication systems, rules, and conventions, is shaped by in turn by and in turn shapes the mind and brains of individuals in the culture. So, one of the most fundamental ways in which cultural beliefs, practices, and ideologies influence psychological processes is in the cognitive schema or self construal style that people use to think about themselves and their relationship to others. And this is very much affected by cultures. As we know, there are two type of cultures which are very prevalent: are individualistic cultures, which are prevalent in the West, and collectivistic cultures, which are prevalent in our side of world, in the Eastern world. So the brains are different. The you can say the connectivities in the brain, the way the brain thinks in those cultures is different. The people, the way they think, the way they perceive things, so different parts, especially the amygdala, the limbic system, the way they behave inside the brain are different into these two type of cultures. So their responses are different, because through the developmental years the connections made in the different type of brains in different cultures are different. So the way the studies have proven, the way a person reacts to another person of the same age, of the same culture, or of the same kind of cultural background is different in both the cultures. So culture affects both what and how we see, and I think I have crossed the time limit. So I'll just say the take-home message is that our brains actively absorb the regulatories in our cultural environment. So brain can be seen as a cultural sponge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vibha. A particular thanks for being your own timekeeper and making sure that the others had their fair share. Um, thank you. May I call on Dr. Kiran Kumar? Dr. Kiran Kumar is an alumna of the University of Mysore. Mysuru, am I right? No, not Mysore. He completed his master's degree in psychology and obtained his PhD in clinical psychology from NIMHANS, Bangalore. He worked in the area of altered states of consciousness for his thesis. He joined as faculty in the Department of Mysore and retired as professor in September 2014. Currently, he is serving as vice president to the International Transpersonal Association USA, and he was awarded the Fulbright Scholar Fellowship to conduct postdoctoral research in the USA and again to teach in USA in 2011. He is also a fellow of the Indian Association of Clinical Psychologists, and association presented Psycho Awards in 2006 for his distinguished contributions to the field of psychology. He was awarded honorary professorship of the International Academy for Yoga Teacher Training and at Belgrade, Serbia, and he is a member of the Scientific Board, International Society for Interdisciplinary Yoga Research, Belgrade. The whole string of his achievements, so I will not cut into his time.
Yes, thank you.
Over to Dr. Kumar.
That's fine. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope your arousal system is fine and is at the optimal level. I thank the organizers of this conference wholeheartedly for giving me this opportunity to go over here, and Dr. Nivedita in particular, because she was the one who somewhere found me and got me here. So now I may deviate a little from this topic because I have already heard very illustrious presentations which overlaps. When I say mental health from an Indian psychological perspective. On the other hand, I have very few slides, about 8 or 9. Even among them, I think I would skip a few, but I'll try to focus more on certain fundamental issues which all of us need to consider. One of the first thing that struck me, or I should say, is probably the idea of East and West is breaking down. I will give illustrations for that over a period of time. Anyway, since though my basic training was in clinical psychology, my name has got attached to Indian psychology by providence. So let me start with that. So if you take the Indian history, you will not find psychology as a subject of study that existed in any ancient universities like Nalanda, Takshashila. We had economics, we had military science, we had political science or linguistics. We had many such subjects, but there was no Manashastra. We had many Shastras, but we did not have a Manashastra defined, studied. So, but it doesn't mean we didn't have knowledge of mind, you know. Professor S.K. Ramchandra Rao in his book Development of Psychological Thought in India has written, we had enough of psychologizing which happened. But that they happened in different contexts. Okay. So you have whatever today we study under psychology being spread over, in spiritual literature, in aesthetics, in Natya Shastra, or in Mahabharata and Ramayana, you will find a lot of social psychology. And you take Kama Sutra, you will find, all related to sexual behavior. And we have the Ayurveda, which deals with life, the illness, disease, habits. So the scope of what I call Indian psychology, and some of our colleagues would put it is from Kama Sutra to Yoga Sutra. Okay, it is not just Adhyatma. That's one of the misunderstanding which I would like to remove. So we can use Kama Sutra as much as we can use Yoga Sutra. That's the first thing I want to reiterate. And where are they coming from? It is coming from our three major ancient Indian traditions, the Vedic, Jaina, and Buddhist. So we have so much of understanding of human nature and behavior. And we know all that we call darshana and dharma. And darshana actually, dictates dharma. But for the people, common people, the word darshana is not often familiar. You will find only in philosophy department or in religious institutions, we speak of Vaidika darshana, Bauddha darshana and all. But the common person we know, Vaidika dharma, Bauddha dharma, Jaina dharma, which is the way of life. But there is a darshana behind it, which actually, is dictating, guiding how we live, conduct ourselves. So, in contemporary language, we can call that worldview. So, darshana and dharma constitutes worldview. And I will try to focus more on elaborating on the concept of worldview, because that is where all the confusion, and we are stuck with so-called modern worldview and trying to grapple with what is happening. So what are the features of this worldview? There are 5 important features. That's an excellent paper by Coltco Rivera, The Psychology of Worldview. You must catch hold of that paper and read that in its entirety. I am summarizing the main features. The first thing is, it's a way of describing the universe and life within it, both in terms of what is and what ought to be. So, today, all the confusion and the problem, the clashes that we are having between the worldview that prevailed in traditions and the so-called scientific worldview. So, you know that scientific worldview emerged somewhere in 700 to 500 BCE with 3 major thinkers. They are called Ionian physicists, Greek thinkers, Thales, Anaximander, Anaxagoras. So they were called natural philosophers who said only what is experientiable in terms of nature, that alone is real. And whatever happens, the cause and effect relationship has to be found within that nature, and there is a regularity in nature, and we cannot bring in attribute any causes which is considered to be supernatural. Till then, even the Greek thinkers Greek culture had a spiritual worldview. So that natural philosophy, later in 19th century, natural philosophers were called scientists, and these natural philosophers had another important goal, to find what is physis. In Greek, physis means the ultimate substance. So our physicists, they are trying to still find the ultimate substance, and that goddamn particle is not available, so they called it God particle. Actually, it's not God particle, goddamn particle. They are so frustrated. So they call it God particle, but it is goddamn particle. So you see that modern physics, modern science, once it kind of fixed a worldview as to what is and what ought to be, automatically that has guided another set of beliefs that includes limiting statements and assumptions regarding what exists, what does not, either in actuality or in principle. What objects or experiences and are good or bad, and what objectives, behaviors, and relationships are desirable or undesirable. So we are stuck with this. This is the problem, basically. Everything, now because many issues have come up, we are Indians. We have our spiritual worldview intact. It has not gone. Even today, everybody, faithfully does puja in some way or the other, and does shraddha for ancestors. That has not changed. So that means the Indian spiritual worldview is there, and all the practices in this way or that way, things are going on. But we have come in contact with another worldview, which is naturalistic worldview, which denies all these things. So, Dr. Nivedita has two good aspects to this conference. One is the view, another is the practice. So, yesterday I gave the workshop on the practice part. Today I'm speaking more of the worldview. So, it is the view which guides the practice. Okay. So, the problem that we are facing today in reconciling with many of the truths, many of the practices, many of the beliefs, everything is because somewhere this, science, the worldview of science is coming in the way of our practices also. So this is a fundamental problem that we are facing. Whether you should do it, Ayurveda is there, and doctor has given an excellent lecture for us in the afternoon. In the homeopathy we had another lecture, and we had even now I'm happy that neuroscience is cultural neuroscience is coming up. So slowly things are shifting. The worldview is shifting. So then what happens is these beliefs define what can be known or done in the world and how it can be known or done. So this is the problem of epistemology. The first one was the problem of ontology. What is universe, what is there, what is not there, and all. The epistemology in modern science is whatever comes through your senses is only real. That is empiricism. Whereas the Indian tradition, we have many pramanas. Different schools, of course, differ, but the Vedanta accepts 6 pramanas, and the Charvakas accepted only the first two, Anumana and Pratyaksha. So in between, and we have the intuition, and India has what is called Yogi Pratyaksha. So all that knowledge, body of knowledge, which has come from other pramanas, we are simply trying to, the Western science rejected it. Okay. So now what has happened in the process? In addition, the defining the goals can be, what goals can be sought in life. A worldview defines what goals should be pursued. Okay. So what goals to be pursued? We have Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. But where is moksha in scientific terms? There is no moksha, right? And dharma is more guided by artha and kama. It is not the dharma which is guiding artha and kama. Dharma is there to guide your artha and kama and see that you reach moksha. So dharma, artha, kama, moksha, there is a sequence with a logic behind it. But you go on the other part of the globe, artha and kama is ruling. Okay. And now even India is, artha and kama, economy is slowing down, how to increase the sales, how to boost. We are losing dharma and moksha also in the process. Worldviews include assumptions that may be unproven and even unprovable, but these assumptions are superordinate in that they provide the epistemic and ontological foundations for other beliefs within a belief system. So, if you ask, for example, where is Brahman? Nobody can show. That's not possible. But that's a guiding principle which is, from which many traditional thinking has developed. So, in other words, a worldview is actually what dictates what does, how we do what we are doing. So, I just, in order, because I knew others are presenting on the Buddhist psychology and all, I didn't want to, because also I am not so in-depth familiar with those things. I just said Vedic worldview. But, Vedas being the most ancient in the country, many of the fundamental things have also percolated into other aspects. So, you see that we have many understanding, beliefs, assumptions, concepts. You can order them level 1, level 2, and level 3. So, level 1 concepts are ontological in nature and epistemological in nature. Level 2 is about nature of organisms and nature of life. Level 3 is about nature of human beings, their development and behavior. So now what is happening? You think we are all practitioners at the level 3. Okay. We are concerned with human behavior, how to deal, heal or, treat or understand and all. And we are all trained in another worldview. Okay. So we don't know where to go, what to do, how to deal with all these things. So sometimes we try to, we are forgetting the level 2 and level 1 concepts, what is behind it. And either we try to fit the Western thing to the level 3, and we simply accept the whole thing, or we are trying to see how we can, combine all these things. So this is where we are confused. So if you take the level 3 assumptions, you see that the nature of human being, how a human being is understood, there are different aspects. First of all, human constitution itself. We have the concept of Stula, Sukshma and Karana Sharira. We have the concept of Panchakosha, and we have the concept of Shat Chakras and the Sahasrara. Then how the human behavior is determined, we have the concept of Triguna and Prarabdha Karma. And human development has two objectives. One is to enhance sattvic qualities and then reduce tamasic and rajasic qualities. So what is the meaning of human existence and purpose of life? Then what is the supreme purpose of life? What is the ideal of human development? Being sthita prajna. We have all these things. But we are not ready to operationalize it, use it. But we means, I'm referring to the people sitting inside this hall. But why? Because we think we are professionals and we are doing this and that. But take the 130 million population of this country. They are not we. They are doing what they want to. They are believing in all these things. And you've in one of the meetings we had the director of NIMHANS who said the registered mental health practitioners, including psychiatrists, neurologists, psychiatric social workers, clinical psychologists, is about 25,000 in India. This he said in an official meeting in UGC some years ago, 2 years, 3 years ago. So even you add non-registered practitioners, they may not cross 35,000 or 50,000. So 130 million people we are. If still the country is moving, and if we are able to send rockets to the moon or Mars, it is not because of all the Western models that we have. It is because of the Indian thinking which is operating even at the common man's, layman's level. So one of the important things there are many important concepts which are related to our identity, our body, our motivation, our values, our emotional, attitudinal, and cognitive aspects. We need to take these concepts and examine them. And I think I may have to close now. Our chairperson is just looking at me. So I will close it by saying that, I'll conclude in 2 minutes. See, this East-West is breaking down. I already said that. Because the scientific worldview which prevailed, which dominated the West for a long time, has started breaking down after 1960s. You all know about the Beatles movement, the commune in which people lived in the UK and United States, the drug revolution when people started using LSD and all, and Abraham Maslow's research on peak experience and self-actualization. And, there is a slow change in the culture. And gradually, the Western society is opening up to the spiritual dimension. That is why many of our Indian gurus are able to make a living there, and with many ashrams. So, when I first went to San Francisco in 1991, there used to be many delis. Delis are small stores where, they sell the essential supplies, including alcohol, newspaper, milk, some bakery stuff, and this and that. So the first time I went, I felt it's very strange. But in India, we find all little small temples, Ashwath Kate and all that, where we do puja, right? And after 30 years, when I go back, I was Googling, I found so many temples all around the Bay Area. And you come to India, all those small little temples or worship places are going. You have multiple complexes coming, many consumers, more liquor shops, more eating habits on the street, okay, and all that. So there is a turn in the culture itself. And I have subscribed to different mail groups. There is something called Shift Network. And that Shift Network has a program on web called Ancestor Healing. How to restore your illness, your health, your physical, how to overcome through ancestor healing. By healing the wounds of the ancestors, a group of experts are doing that. So what I'm saying is, it is no more East-West. The idea of chakra, the idea of subtle body, there are more books coming on chakra healing than Indians are writing. So what I say is, there is a spiritual renaissance happening in the West, and our chakras are going down from Anahata to Mooladhara Swadhisthana, and their chakras are rising up from Mooladhara to Anahata and Vishuddha. So therefore, it is better. We all, don't get influenced by, all the modern psychological theories alone. They are good, they have value, but we also try to, actually forget the east-west difference. On the other hand, think which therapy will suit whom for what problem at which chakra level. With that, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran Kumar. I call on our next speaker. We'll have the session after this, at the end of it, for the question answers. So you can keep your questions, and in case you don't want to forget them, write them down. Ms. Parisha Jijna Mehta, who's a clinical psychologist and is trained in NIMHANS, and she said she would go straight deep dive into it. So, EBAS, yeah. Sorry, did I say NIMHANS? She's from EBAS, yeah. And working at the MS University of Baroda.
Thank you, Geshila and Dr. Nivedita, for this opportunity. And one of the reasons I'm standing here in front of you is because in my formative years, I've had teachers like Dr. Vibha. So thank you, ma'am, also. And today I'll be talking about overview of Western psychology in mental health and well-being. So I thought since I have to give an overview, we'll just look at a historical timeline of Western psychology, and then move on to advent of positive psychology today, then move on to various theories of well-being, one of the current fields, psychoneuroimmunology, and then we'll look at the interface of Western and Eastern psychology. Okay. So starting with the timeline, if we look at mental health, we can almost go back 130 years ago. In 1886, Sigmund Freud started treating patients, which at that time was known as talking cure. And we'll go through each of them in detail. He has given 3 levels of awareness. Then in 1907, what happened was most of his students, they started breaking away from him. Very famous students like Carl Jung, Karen Horney. And this is one of my favorite quotes of Carl Jung. He said, if there is anything that we wish to change in a child, we should first examine if we can change ourselves. So if Freud would have said, look into the child's defense mechanisms, etc. But Jung said something opposite. He said, look within yourself. Then slowly in 1920, behaviorism started. So starting with Watson, and Watson has given a very controversial quote. He said, men are built, they are not born. He said, give me a baby and I'll make it climb and use its hand. I'll make it a thief or a gunman or a criminal. The possibilities of shaping are endless. So this gives a lot of emphasis on the role of environment in shaping human personality. Then 2 decades later, my favorite movement, the humanistic movement, started. So in 40s, we had people like Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow. And this is again a very nice quote from Rogers. Rogers said that research evidence keeps piling up and it points strongly to the conclusion that empathy is necessary for change. Okay, so what we call today as non-specific factors, they are the vehicle of therapy. And then 1962-67, you had the whole cognitive movement starting. So you had pioneers like Albert Ellis, then you had Aaron Beck, starting with cognitive movement. Now we'll go to psychoanalysis. So this is Freud's model of awareness, and these are very old diagrams, so you might not find them in, these are the original diagrams of Freud. So the shaded part that you see, that is mainly what Freud emphasized on, that is unconscious, and he compared it to an iceberg. So only 10% is in our conscious awareness and 90% is in our unconscious awareness. Right? This is again a very old drawing. This is a drawing about his theory of illness, especially for psychosomatic illness. So what he said is, the first part, where the shaded part, is where all our repressed material goes. So for example, if I'm very hostile or very angry towards somebody, but for whatever reason I can't express it, so that anger I may have to repress. But as time goes on, that repressed material always wants to express itself, but we can't do it directly, right? So what may happen is deflection may happen, and that repressed material may come out as a symptom on your body. That is why it is known as psychosomatic. So for example, that anger may come onto my head in the form of headaches. I may get skin rashes. I may develop ulcers. Right? So this was very basic of psychoanalysis. Moving on to behaviorism. Behaviorism focuses a lot on reinforcements. These concepts are very old, but we are using them even today. So, for example, if I have to do psychological management for obesity and that person just doesn't want to exercise, I can use the concept of positive reinforcement. I can tell them exercise 5 days a week. On the sixth day, since you have exercised, you positively reward yourself with small piece of chocolate or go out and buy whatever you want. So behaviorism works even today. Then moving on to Carl Rogers. So Rogers has spoken a lot about self and how self manifests in illness. So he's spoken about ideal self and real self. So ideal self is what you think you should be or what you think you ought to be. Real self is what you are. So, for example, taking a cue from my personal life, my ideal self would be as a PhD student, I should focus on my work for 3 to 4 hours a day. Real self doesn't do it even in 1 month. So, there's a lot of incongruency, and as the incongruency gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment all also becomes bigger, right? Now moving on to cognitive approach. So cognitive approach is what we use a lot in India. Basically we work on this cycle. Your thoughts affect your emotions, which affects your behavior. So simple example, if I think that I will not pass in my exams, I'm going to start feeling very anxious. If I feel very anxious, my behavior might go into avoidance. I can have avoidance as a coping mechanism, or I might go into bad habits like eating a lot, etc. So, what you think definitely affects how you feel, which in turn definitely affects your behavior. Now, cognitive approach gives a lot of emphasis on what we call cognitive dysfunctions or cognitive errors. The most common ones, what we see in depression, are personalization. So, for example, anything bad happens, I attribute it to myself. So, for example, if I'm going through a divorce, everything will be blamed onto myself, right? In suicidal patients, we see a lot of magnification. I failed to get admission in an engineering college, my life is over. So the whole situation is catastrophized, and that's why it works very strongly in people who are suicidal. Anxiety, in anxiety you have a lot of overgeneralization, again a lot of worry about the future. Now moving on to more recent field. So in 1998, that is hardly 20-30 years ago, this is Martin Seligman. He was going through a lot of problems in his personal life as well. And the turning point came when his 5-year-old daughter at that time told him that you should stop complaining so much. So then he decided that my whole career up till now I've only focused on what are the weaknesses in this client, what is not working in this client. And he said that it is high time that we start thinking of what is working in clients, what are the strong points in clients. So fortunately for him, in 1998 he was the president of American Psychological Association, which is a very powerful position to be in, and he used that position to get a lot of grants into this whole field of positive psychology. So this is his exact quote. He said that psychology needs to further knowledge about what makes life worth living. So that is what we call strength focused approach. Still then, till 1998, we had DSM. DSM is a very old book. Currently, it's in its 5th edition. And DSM is classification of all the mental disorders. So you have depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. As an antidote to DSM, Seligman came out with strength classification. So he said we have a classification for mental illness. Why not have a classification for human strengths? And this is a beautiful book. He has classified human strengths into these categories. If you are an educator or working with children, I highly recommend you to go through this, because we need to tell our children about their strengths as well. Okay. So he has spoken about cognitive strengths such as wisdom, creativity, curiosity. Then he goes on to talk about emotional strengths such as bravery, honesty, and then civic level strengths. So, for example, treating everybody fairly, treating everybody with a just hand, and transcendental. So, when you go beyond yourself, gratitude, etc. There is a free model, FREE, if you want to do it with your children. That is focus, release, educate, and expand. This Through this model, you can help your children or your college students to expand their strengths. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then another model for mental health which has recently come about is Keys has given this model. Now this is a dimensional approach to mental health. Usually we follow a very categorical approach. So for example, either you are mentally healthy or you are not, but this takes a very dimensional approach. Now why I like this approach is because it reduces the stigma in mental health. It says that we all are at a continuum, and we can shift from one point to another point. So today I might be mentally healthy, but tomorrow I can move up the continuum and become depressed. So this really reduces the stigma, and DSM is working on bringing dimensional approach into at least few of the disorders like personality disorders. So this talks about flourishing and languishing. So people who are flourishing are mentally very healthy, and people who are languishing are having mental illness. Now again, here this model talks about people with mental illness but who are still high functioning. So for example, when Anushka Sharma was diagnosed with anxiety, her work commitments did not suffer. When Deepika Padukone was diagnosed with depression, she still continued shooting. So this model talks that it reduces the stigma that you could have a mental illness, but it will not affect your work. You can still function. So what we call high functioning anxiety, high functioning depression. Then Seligman also slowly realized that it is easier to create strong children rather than later on in life heal broken adults. So he and his colleagues came up with a program called Pen Resiliency Program. In India also, NIMHANS is working on a similar program called Feel Good Doing Well. So with children you can do this. This model has been adapted in India also. In Hyderabad has some studies. So here you can teach children how to be self-aware, how to regulate your emotions. And research says that when you do this with children and young adults, it is a preventive measure. Later on in life, they are less at risk to develop problems like depression, because earlier on in life, you have taught them skills of optimism, self-awareness, self-regulation. Seligman also introduced a new theory of well-being. This is one of the older theories, where he said if you want to be happy in life, you must have these 5 conditions. So P stands for positive emotions. E stands for engagement, where you are very engaged in your work. R is for relationships. Good relationships are like a buffer to anxiety and depression. They prevent you or protect you from falling into mental illness. Most meaningful is the meaning part. You need to have a meaning in life, right? And A is for goal accomplishment. Now, if we look at the first one, positive emotions, this is a very, very highly cited scientist, Barbara Fredrickson. This theory of hers has, I checked today, it has almost 20,000 citations. So, broad and build theory. Again, those who are in education, very important for them. Her research in the lab showed that when you have or when you cultivate positive emotions, what happens is there is a broadening effect. Broadening effect as in cognitive broadening. So you develop more creativity, you have your thought action repertoires broaden. Over time, this leads to a building of your personal resources. So, for example, your social relationships improve, your health improves, and this becomes a loop. So when all that improves, you have more positive emotions. The more positive emotions you have, again, so this research of hers has highlighted the importance of having positive emotions. And then this, what again Seligman has spoken about, 3 types of happiness. So he said the very, very momentary fleeting happiness is pleasure, but that is not sustainable. Then he spoke about passion. He and his colleague Dr. Mihai have worked a lot on something called flow, FLOW. Flow can again be applied with children. So flow is when you engage them wherein they are totally absorbed in the work, time contracts. So for example, if you like music, you're listening to your favorite music, 20 minutes might seem like just 2 minutes. But the most sustainable form of happiness is again what Buddhism also talks about, higher purpose, meaning in life. You do something for others, transcend beyond yourself. And last model of well-being, Carol Riff, another psychologist. She lot of overlaps with Seligman. Again, here she's spoken about purpose in life, relationships. Okay. Now we come to a very interesting new field called psychoneuroimmunology. This field basically studies the interrelationships between all our nervous system, endocrine system, and our immune system. This is what we call gut-brain axis, right? So there is bi-directional communication between your gut means your stomach, and your brain. Okay? Now, we used to have a lot of cases in our department where somehow we had more hostel students who are complaining of depression, anxiety, etc. And slowly, what over time, what I just a hypothesis that they don't eat healthy food. They don't eat good food in the mess. They order from Swiggy, Zomato, etc. So what happens is when your gut flora is not healthy, what happens is the neurotransmitters in your brain, they are affected. So here you can see from gut to brain, the production, expression, and turnover of neurotransmitters like serotonin. Serotonin is highly implicated in depression. GABA again highly implicated in anxiety. And from the brain to the gut, it is affecting your immune system. So pure research is showing us that what we eat has such a profound impact on our brain. Right? So associated factors of this gut-brain axis are definitely disturbances in your circadian rhythms, your biological clock. Again, if you eat a lot of processed food, which most students living in hostels do, your gut flora is not healthy, and lack of exercise. Currently, Gujarat is facing an epidemic with the first two factors, disturbances in bioclock and highly fat diet. Okay. Then we come to last point, interface between Buddhism and Western psychology. So this has already been spoken about. John Kabat-Zinn, almost 30 years ago, he started MBSR, and in 1995 he integrated mindfulness into cognitive therapy. So we saw almost after 30 years, mindfulness was integrated in cognitive therapy. Now, just a little bit research on loving kindness meditation. Again, Barbara Fredrickson, who gave the topic of broad and build theory, she has done a lot of research on loving kindness meditation. And what she found was that just by meditating through this technique, again, you have increase in your personal resources, social health. And one very fascinating research that loving kindness meditation actually improves your vagus nerve tone. So vagus nerve is your largest nerve in the body, right from the base of your brain to your gut. And this nerve is highly implicated in mental health. And when you meditate, just simple 10 minutes of loving kindness meditation increases the activity of this nerve, which has very beneficial effects on your both mental as well as physical health. Then we come to Buddhism talks a lot about compassion. In the West, one very cute, I would say cute program is going on. It's called Roots of Compassion. What they do is they bring a small infant into the classroom, and this baby is used to teach compassion to middle schoolers. So here you can see that this baby is brought, and through this baby the children over here are learning what are emotions, what is for example, when the baby feels hurt, what can you do, what may the baby be feeling. So children highly enjoy it. BBC has done a documentary on this program. It's just a 5-minute documentary, you can see it online. Okay, so just last 2 minutes, you also have compassion focused therapy and self compassion. And nowadays you have equanimity also in with between in Western psychology. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm scaring the panel so much that they decided they don't even want introductions. Just say this and be done with it, so that I don't tell them time up. Okay. Delighted to invite Anand Chabukishwar. Chabukswar. Okay, I stand corrected. He's a practitioner. He's into art-based therapy, and we've had the privilege of pulling him out from tomorrow's session to today's session. So over to Anand.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, all of you. And the last 20 minutes between you and your chai, I'm standing here. Um uh, as ma'am already said, I have been bumped up from the next panel, which is the practice panel and examples of practice. So, after all these amazing scholarly representations uh, and in depth theoretical frameworks, I'm here actually to talk about the aspects of practice and based on our field experience of what is happening in arts based therapy. So before I go any further, just I wanted to clarify, when we call something therapy and the practice of therapy, it is not this kind of therapy we are not doing for people who are, generally not feeling okay, who can do with a good cup of chai or go for a picnic and that should be fine for them. So it is not that kind of, when we are talking about arts-based therapy in mental health, we are talking about people who cannot access mental wellness because of disturbances that are really harming and hampering them. So, having said that, just to give as I'm a practitioner, the tools of art is something which I would like to use, and to establish the context of art, therapy, and mental health, I'm going to offer a metaphor, and the metaphor comes in the form of a traditional Indian tale. This is about 200 or 500, 2 to 500 year old tale, originally found in Karnataka and several other states of India. And the tale goes simply something like this: there is this woman, housewife, she is, and she knows a story and she knows a song, but she never tells the story to anyone, she never sings the song to anyone. And as a result of that, they're trapped inside her and they want to take revenge on her. And one afternoon, after she finishes her morning chore, she's lying down, just like some people, all of us have been, trying to nap in between. So she was napping, and her mouth felt slightly ajar. So, as a revenge, out came the song and converted itself into a pair of man's chappals, footwear. And out came the song and hung itself on the peg in the form of a man's coat. Now, the woman had no clue this had happened. In the evening, the husband came back from work. And as soon as he came back near the door, what does he see? Obviously, a pair of man's footwear and a coat. So he came inside and he asks, is someone visiting? Someone from your parents' home? And she says, no, 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 no one has come. What are you asking? He said, no, no, there is a man's footwear there. There's a man's coat. How come you don't know? And, of course, you all know what happens next. What started as a simple conversation between the husband and wife, as an inquiry, immediately bumped into from one thing to another. You always blame me, you always do that, and so on. So lots of emotions came up. He was so upset and so angry with her. He picked up his blanket saying, I'm not going to sleep in this house anymore. And he left home. And the poor woman, having no clue where did the story and the song come, where did the footwear and the coat come from, she kind of late into the night kept on thinking. At one point she put out the lamp. Now remember, this is an old story, so these are oil lamps. Now in that particular village, all the oil lamps, once they were put out from the home, would gather in the temple for the night. It's an Indian tale, nothing dies just like that. If you put it out here, it will come out there somewhere else. So that kind of logic. So this particular flame is late that night. This lamp is late coming to the temple. So all other lamps are waiting, saying, hey, what happened? Why are you late? So he says, Arey, what to tell you? There was a lovely fight in our house. Immediately everyone is excited. Everyone wants to know what it is about. And so the lamp describes that there was a man's footwear and a man's coat. The husband asked the wife about it. The wife could not explain it. And so they had a fight. So all the lamps giggled and all that, but there was one smarter one. So he said, is the woman lying or she really doesn't know? So of course, the lamp says, no, 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 that poor woman, she's not lying. She knows a story and she knows a song, but she never told the story to anyone, never sang the song to anyone. So as a revenge, the song came out and became footwear, and the story came out and became a coat. And of course, all the lambs giggled, and there's these human beings also now and all that, and they continued with their gossip the next house. Meanwhile, who do you think under the blanket was sleeping in the corner of the temple? The husband. And rare as it is, being a man, he understood what they were talking about. So he rushed home and he shook his wife and he woke her up and said, "Come on, wake up. You must tell me your story. You must sing your song to me." And poor thing, she rubbing her eyes, she woke up and she looked at him and said, "What story? What song? I don't know anything. What story? What song? I don't know anything. What story?" And this is where the story ends, unfortunately, the traditional one. But for us, this was the beginning of the search of in mental health. So the organization was formed in 2001. It's called the World Center for Creative Learning. Uh, and we were, group of artists also trained as therapists, and we wanted to bring it in. How can we bring arts to help people to heal? So the motivation was, to do this, but at the same time, we wanted to do it in a way which really brought benefit. So uh, we realized that over a period of time, continuously doing the work, because that time when we started, it was all so vague and unclear, but to continuously do the work and to document the work. So action and research, and then research fed again into action, which basically practice and training is what we eventually arrived at. And this is just to, say that there's enough has been done. And out of the 28,000 hours of practice counted till 2018, 50% of it is just the team of four: Asha, Zubin, me, and Deborah, the four of the core team members. So basically, it just meant day in, day out, be on the field, practice, see what works, and bring it back to the design table, write about it, reflect about it, refine it, and so on and so forth. So, having said that, this is just the broader context of how ABT came into being. And of course, now I'm very happy to say that now there are so many lovely practitioners all over India doing the work that they find is meaningful in their own organizations. And I'm very grateful to all of them for doing that. So, in mental health, if you see the primacy for ABT, I'll just kind of quickly give a summary of the view, and I think Dr. Nivedita will also be talking about, because she has great experience in mental health and arts-based therapy as well. But it's the world of metaphor. The worlds are metaphors. So if you look at our day-to-day world, that's also a metaphor. And what's a metaphor? All the world's a stage, that kind of thing. Basically, there are plenty of metaphors all the time, including our body. If someone is sitting like this, that could be a metaphor. If someone is sitting like this, that could be a metaphor. But simply something that symbolizes, represents. It's an image of something. Say, for example, we take a metaphor: the world is a ball. The world is a ball. Then you might want to explore it. Oh, what kind of ball? Oh, it's a crumpled ball. No, it's a heavy ball. Oh, it's a ball which you can, it is a sticky ball. So if you explore it, it goes in metaphors, reveal the layers of meanings that they hold within them. And if you don't need to explore it, you can play with it, because after all, it's a ball, you see. So that's the approach with which ABT kind of goes. Now, this is taken to the participant, and rather than calling them patient or client, I'd prefer the word participant here, where this metaphors go back and forth into these worlds. And I'm going to tell you briefly the story of Madhu, with whom I was working. Madhu was in her 30s and diagnosed with schizophrenia, continuously obsessive thoughts and hallucinations. Her IQ was diagnosed as to be on borderline IQ, and she would be constantly mumbling. She had a history of violence at home, hitting parents, and there was a huge amount of guilt for having done those things at home, in fits of anger. And when we started, because of arts, and Madhu used to like arts, she started engaging and paying attention. And one day in the session, she said, I am feeling my anger is coming up. So, immediately, okay, what can you do in ABT? You offer a metaphor saying, okay, shall we do boxing? Of course, not real boxing. This is drama. So, okay, let's do boxing. So, rigorous movements, but with So we develop a game around it. One participant is standing there, another one there, and they're doing actually boxing, pretending to take the blow and so on and so forth. Now this same boxing moves into movement, hands and movement, and if you add music to it, then it is now gone into music and movement. So the metaphor has found a limited, but for now a possibility to alter and change. And this is how how ABT holds the metaphors of the people who are participating in it. Another time, so the one of the thing is that how much of this to mitigate, it depends on the intensity of suffering and the impact on functioning. Because in ABT we believe that so-called normal day-to-day world is also metaphors. Participants, if they are having troubles and problems, those are also metaphors, and to the extent it is problematic for their functioning, these metaphors need to be worked on. Another example, same, I continue with Madhu's story, where at one point she said we were working a small drama skit on guests and unwanted guests coming home. So after she does this, she says that, you know what, there is a guest, there is someone that she is continuously competing with me. She does everything that I want to do. She doesn't allow me to do anything. So obviously she was talking about a very active audiovisual hallucination that she was having. So again, in the play way, we developed a ritual saying that anytime there is an unwanted guest, just say stop and go, and repeat that again and again. So we brought in some amount of alertness to it. She kept on practicing it, and at one point she said, you know what, every time I'm feeling anger or she comes, I'm saying stop and go, and it actually works. She reported almost a month and a half later. So techniques which are metaphorical develop, and they work for the client even outside the space of actually doing that. And last but not least, with Madhu, I'll tell you there's a traditional another traditional very popular Maharashtrian tale, which I know that there are versions in Gujarat as well as in Bengal, where there is this, I'll just quickly summarize. There is this old woman who's very unwell. So she wants to go to her daughter's place, which is across the jungle, for rest. And as usual in all Indian, I mean, in tales, she's crossing the jungle, so she meets a wolf, a lion, and each one of them says, shall I eat you? And then she said, no, look at me, all I'm skin and bones. Don't you eat me. I'll come back from my daughter's place. That time I will be fat and nice. You can eat me that time. So it's a children's rhyming tale, and it goes on like that. And then, of course, she comes back. She says to her daughter, you know what? Now I'm well, I'm going back, but those predators are going to eat me up. Daughter says, don't you worry. She gives her a big pumpkin. She says, you sit inside this and you run. So she goes, run my pumpkin. In Marathi, we say, chal re bhoplya tunuk tunuk. And in Bengali, it goes, lau gad gad, lau gad gad. And she sits in the pumpkin and she runs, and none of them can recognize her, and so she is saved. Now, after we played with this tale, after we did improvisations, when we were sitting, Madhu said to me, I knew this story as a child, but this is not a children's tale. It is about care and protection. She was unwell, right? When you are unwell, you should go to your daughter and take good rest. So you see how insights on their own are getting generated. And then she said, one of the most, remember, we are talking about a person who's diagnosed as IQ borderline. And she says to me, she's not sitting in the pumpkin. She's actually changed so much that no one can recognize anymore to trouble her. Now, this kind of possibility is there. And this comes primarily because of the approach as well as the tools and techniques. And the approach ultimately is the basis of Buddhist psychology and ethics, in which, we consider the world itself as a metaphor. And the world is also something that we are aspiring to get out of. Not that this normal world is amazing and I want to stay here. That also we are seeking to be free of all the kleshas eventually. So this thought pattern and the application, this is how it comes together. So very briefly, I'll tell you what is the framework. Arts-based therapy, the way we have been practicing it in India since 2001, is based on Buddhist psychology and ethics. It primarily follows Shakyamuni Buddhas and his many followers and masters who have taught us the wisdom aspect of the nature of existence, the nature of phenomena, nature of self, the anitya, anatma, advaya, texts like Abhidharma Kosha, teachers like Geshe-la, from whom also I have really learned. All of us have been learning states of mind, how they are, and the compassion aspects, the path to alleviate suffering. What to do, maybe the paramitas, the ethics, and this Buddhist psychology and ethics is not only for the so-called participant. It is first and foremost for the practitioner to understand, to learn, and to practice, and there onwards translate that understanding through artistic tools for the participant. So, of course, it is not happening in isolation. This all is supported from information, from developmental studies, neuroscientific studies, and I'm extremely happy with all the presentations. I mean, there's so much new knowledge which is just, adding continuously. So, all this information also informs the practice of arts-based therapy. So, this is translated through skillful means or kushala upaya into practice, where we try to seek a balance. Multiple art forms are used. Arts-based therapy, as many a times, sometimes we make a mistake of art, singular art. It is time up. Okay, so just 2 minutes more, and I will be off.
5 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes more. Okay, great. Now I'm almost there. So it uses multiple art forms, not only drama, not only music, not only movement, not only visual arts, a generic vocabulary. There are two important reasons for doing this. A, people who are psychologists, social workers, and who really want to help people are not artists per se. It's easier for them to learn a generic vocabulary of art forms. Second important reason, it is need-based. It is based on the need of a client. For example, after 19 years of experience, we know for sure that autistic children relate better with music initially. Then you can work with them too because of the brain issues and so on and so forth. So like that, a client might also have an artistic form preference to begin with. So that's why, to make it accessible, it's all art forms, accessible for both the participant as well as the practitioner. And we are using systematic things like domains and key concepts to arrive at specific individualized therapeutic goals. And I can say that the last 2 points relate with the benefits of Western approach, that it should be evidence based rather than just merely saying, oh, I did this and it was okay. So that kind of thing. So I'll skip through. So there are aspects of assessment and understanding which are observable, all these aspects, and there are aspects which are called key concepts, which are derived from His Holiness's teaching, which are not observable, which are immeasurable. So we use both these aspects when we are practicing with people. So the domains are the measurable ones, observable ones, and the immeasurable ones are the key concepts. So I can definitely tell you that based on 300 plus case studies that students have done over a period of time, I'm skipping that slide. Loads of benefits have come. I will give the website at the end. Lots of research papers and research has been uploaded there. People can access methods and things. So just to summarize, in some way, we are working with the person, not diagnosis. The focus is definitely positive psychology started, I just heard it's 1998. From 2001 we are working on with a focus on ability rather than disability, and many other organizations in India are also doing that. And it is a complementary therapy, so we are not saying throw out all other things. Arts-based therapy is one component, maybe a physiotherapist, a speech therapist, CBT, and many other wonderful therapeutic approaches. If they work in alignment with each other, they work extremely well for people. So that's in summary arts-based therapy. I had a couple of other case studies which we would have shared, but time is up. So on that note, I would just pray, because of this conference, we got a chance to say Bhavatu Sarva Mangalam once again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's on. Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers. And first, my apologies for seeming like a school mom. but we have 4 more speakers after this, right? 3 more. So, and we have been running a little behind schedule. I'll now throw open to question and answers, maybe 5 minutes? 10? Yeah. Just identify yourself and tell us whom the question is for, if it's for anyone in particular.
Thank you. Myself Himanshu Gupta, and I am pursuing MCOM from University of Delhi. I have questions for two of the speakers. First is to Dr. Vibha Sharma ma'am. You mentioned the terms anatomical and physiological mechanism of brain and neuroplasticity. So could you please just make these terms clear? This is first. And second is like we all know that we are not able to utilize our brain to 100% of the capacity. Even the most of the geniuses are able to utilize it to the extent of 10 to 12%. So, why is it so? What is the main reason behind it? So, and one question is to.
Could be limited to one for now, in case others want, then we can come back.
Yeah. What I can say is, started with that brain is still a mystery. So, what anatomical and physiological means is, anatomical is about the structure, the how the structure is learned or studied. Through structure, how can we know about the brain? Physiological is how it works. So different chemicals and parts, blood and other things, which comes into physiology, how basically it functions. And you talked about neuroplasticity. You asked, neuroplasticity is a concept which says that like if one part of the or one small part gets injured, so other areas, nearby areas takes the function. Nearby neurons and circuits are activated, so they can take up the function of that particular area. So brain is not like it is, once it is damaged, it is damaged. It's like plasticity is like, plasticity. So it has plasticity, so it can come back, those functions can come back. So that's the neuroplasticity.
And the second one, like why we are not able to.
Why
is it possible?
For that I said it's a mystery. Still, it's a mystery. It can be activated, so it can be used. Brain is like a thing which we are used much. It can be you can be increase the potential only by using it. Use it or lose it.
Hello, my question is for Dr. Kiran Kumar sir. So you talked about ancestral healing. So
A little louder, please.
so you talked about ancestral healing. So I wanted to know how, like in terms of psychotherapy, it is seen, like as old memories or what.
Okay, I don't have the details of that to give the mechanism. I just came across that only yesterday on my mail, so I have not myself read it. But with whatever I have so far studied, I can give a general view. First of all, how the question of mechanism you are asking me, how does it work? What is that? Yeah, that is, you see, if you take the worldview that we are all interconnected in the universe. Second one, that we are not just body, we are souls, and the soul can go beyond the body. Okay, then the soul, according to Indian belief system, we have the Stula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, and Karana Sharira. So when somebody dies, Stula Sharira is what gets disintegrated. That is what is burnt. But Sukshma Sharira, along with the Karana Sharira, will carry the experiences of the life, and then it will take another body. So this is a belief system we have. Now, all the jivas have their pains and pleasures and wounds and other things, which are all operating in the universe. And some of those experiences could be affecting us also in the progeny. And therefore, healing at a high level, at a level which you cannot see, but a healing that happens at some other level can release your pain and suffering now. Now, when I explain all this, including you, all the august audience here may be wondering, why did Dr. Nivedita invited Kiran Kumar all the way from Mysore? He is going back to some superstition and whatever we want to throw or whatever we want to leave behind and go. But what I am saying is this ancestral healing I'm speaking is not coming from Kashi or Varanasi or Gaya. It is coming from California, New Mexico, and other places. So therefore, what is happening today in the world is for the last 50, 60 years, there is a spiritual boom all over the world. Please be open to that. And all these things are being discussed, actively practiced, okay? And why we are not able to take it, again we go back to the worldview. It is the clash between the so-called scientific worldview and the spiritual worldview. So at this point of time, the mechanism cannot be explained, but you go to Garuda Purana and read. The mechanism of all these things have been explained in Garuda Purana. But now, because I am here, I got an opportunity to speak. My humble submission to all of you is, each one of you make an active effort to go back to the tradition and try to understand the intrinsic logic, intrinsic worldview, intrinsic explanations, and articulate it. Girishwar ji is here. Professor Girishwar Mishra was the professor of psychology in the Delhi University and vice chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University in Wardha. I'm honored that he came here all the way to meet me. If he remembers, we had a National Academy of Psychology conference in 2001 in Kollam, where he was chairing and I was presenting. Then one Professor Tripathi from Uttar Pradesh, from somewhere, when I made a presentation on the Indian perspective, he got up and said, "You are saffronizing psychology." So he was very angry with me. Then Professor Girishwarji was on the chairperson. So I told him, I pointed out to an Australian who had come to make a presentation on non-dual psychotherapy. So I showed to him and said, look, if you don't take seriously the Indian thought, Indian traditions, then he will write a book on Indian thought and tradition using the concepts, and you will start teaching that, and this is what is going to happen. So what is happening today is, we are not able to come out of the colonization of our mind. We got 75 years of independence, but mentally we are still looking for the models. So I just want to say, each one of you have to, actively make an attempt. Now, Mr. Anand has given an excellent presentation on that. He is a practitioner, so he is able to use his skills, in using it. But when he spoke of all that, and all the imagery, imagination, the storytelling, and all, what is the framework for that? Where did it come from? Is it coming from Panchatantra, finally? Is it coming from Jataka tales, or is it coming from certain other things? Is it the philosophy that, reality is your construction, which is, in the West, is Gergen and others are speaking of social constructionism. But we have already spoken about reality is a construction. We have what is called Anekantavada in Jainism. So are we not going to take all this seriously? Are we to wait for some Westerners to write the book and then we start teaching? So this is my answer for that.
Could we have one last question, please? Yeah.
This question is directed to Ms. Mehta. You spoke about flow, mindless flow. Now, what is the difference or similarity between flow and mindfulness?
Uh, That's a very good question. In my understanding, I think flow is a much more sustained state of mindfulness. So, for example, simple example, when we teach flow, we in Gujarat we have Garba, right? So over there they dance from 6 in the evening to 3 in the night, so 9 hours. They don't feel tired, nothing. So they are totally in the moment. Time contracts for them, and flow was actually studied on people who were very good in their work. So for example, artists, uh, yeah, storytellers, etc. So in my understanding, I think it is a more sustained. If somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Ma'am, any idea? Flow, Nihai ka concept.
Yeah, actually, mindfulness otherwise talks about being into the state. So, flow is kind of a meditational state, if we call like active meditation, when someone is endorsed into something and his all thoughts, emotions, and everything is in flow with the certain set of mental state. You can say a mental state is constant and everything is in sync and flowing with that mental state, which is prevailing for a longer period of time.
It is one subset of another, or that I'm still trying to understand. Is mindfulness subset of flow, or
Uh,
flow is subset of mindfulness?
I think flow can be a subset of mindfulness. Flow can be a subset of mindfulness. Or
Yeah.
experiential level, and from there you go. It's like a timeline that is subconsciousness is there, unconsciousness is also there, the non-consciousness state is also there. However, at each and every level there is a different mindfulness. So you understood flow is a longer thing, it's a universal, a larger set, whereas mindfulness, I would say, it flows within that. So it's more paradoxical kind of a thing, I would say. However, try to understand flow is like a timeline within which consciousness is taking place at each and every moment of it. So that's how I would say that. And each and every philosophy, whether you start off from Buddhist psychology or Buddhism or Jainism and Vedic philosophy, they all talk about this kind of a thing. However, the way they perceive the consciousness, they're contradicting each other. That's the only difference for us. Thank you.
I'd like to add a few words. I'm here. Given that this conference is really bringing in diverse schools, I think your question is highlighting something very interesting, because flow comes from a certain school of thought and mindfulness comes from a certain school of thought. Also, the way the words have been eventually used out of the school of thought have changed its meaning substantially. So I don't know if the question should be about whether one is a subset of the other or not, to really recognize they're coming from very different theoretical frameworks and therefore need to perhaps be understood in its entirety by itself.
Let me add one thing. The concept of flow is part of the positive psychology movement. Today, a person who was teaching at Chicago, Mihaly, it's a very difficult name, and he talks about flow. It's more like you are absorbed in an activity. You forget yourself. It's not trance. No, you are reading a novel and you are absorbed. You forget the time. Right? Like in Gita, it is said karma becomes akarma, and it's a spontaneous activity. So you are engaged and absorbed in that. You identify with that. You forget yourself, time, everything. So flow is that kind of state, right? So engaging in an activity very intensely. That is the meaning, limited meaning of flow. You can take it to other contexts and have different. And I think mindfulness is a term more familiar to many people. I will not talk about that.
Thank you very much. Okay, last question.
One more point I just wanted to mention about plasticity. I am reminded of one of the quote of His Highness Dalai Lama, that mind has a wiring, but that wiring is not static. It is not fixed. It can be rewired. You know, different connections can be created. And there is evidence also that by meditation there are changes, structural changes in the brain. If you take that into account, plasticity goes much beyond than what you are saying. Thank you.
I think there's one last question.
Hello. Thank you so much for your enlightening talk. So I don't have any specific one to ask, but my question is just wanted to know that from the from listening to all the talks, it was very clear to me that positive qualities, I mean, positive qualities, they really serve for the happiness of our life, right? So my question is, from the Buddhist perspective, it was quite clear to me that the very nature of human is compassionate and more loving. So just wanted to ask for you all that what is the contemporary psychologist's perspective on the nature of human or the nature of mind? Is that correct? I just wanted to hear the contemporary. modern
Your last question is completely bowled everybody over because it requires a thesis. I would think.
It's
So it would
decided
require a
on
whole
that.
thesis because that's what we've been talking about to develop what I mean, in the morning, Yeshla spoke about definitions, or other speakers spoke of what the mind is or is not. But the what is the human mind heading for, or your question on what's next for human beings, I think a fairly existential question. I don't know if anyone has an answer to that which can be
Because
summed up.
the research that you all have done is it clearly shows that
Okay.
positive.
I think Dr. Kiran Kumar has a point in that.
I'll just add a point to that. See, the idea of mind and matter are separate is Cartesian dualism, which we have inherited from Rene Descartes, and that is the primary model. And in the Western tradition, consciousness or mind, they are used interchangeably. But in the Indian thought, we have from the beginning the idea of Chetana and Chaitanya, which derive from Chit, which stand for consciousness. Then we have the Manas or Antahkarana. Okay. And the Chitta, Chetana, Chaitanya is primary, whereas the Antahkarana, the so-called Manas, Buddhi, Ahankar, Chitta, they are all called Jada, part of Prakriti. Again constituted of Trigunas. So we have this model in our country now. But in the past few years, say 20, 30, 40 years, when the physics moved from the Newtonian to the quantum physics, now physicists are actually trying to understand, grapple what is all this about. So one of the top theoretical physicists, Henry Stapp, who is an emeritus professor from University of California, Berkeley, in one of the conferences in Science and Non-Duality, which in California, said consciousness is primary, not matter. So during the lunchtime, I asked him, if you say consciousness is primary, then we have two models of consciousness in India. One is the Advaita Vedanta model. The other one is the Sankhya model, which speaks of Purusha and Prakriti. So please tell me what you mean by consciousness. He said, without blinking, he said Advaita. So finally, if we are able to accept it, anyway, once they bring it to the books, we will accept it. So when consciousness becomes primary, then the mind, guna and all those things will come. So the concept of mind is part of the triguna. So more research needs to be done on triguna, because mind matter dichotomy and all will be resolved. More we focus on sattva, rajas and tamas. Thank you.
So basically, I think the question that she's asking is from the Western perspective, whether or not there is any, the suggestion or idea as to the nature of this mind which is empirical, which we can experience. So that mind, the true nature of that is that gentle, kind, compassionate, or very rude, unkind. So this is the question asked to the people who speak from the Western, the psychology point of view.
Okay, positive psychology development movement is recognizing those positive aspects of mind. So earlier we all bothered about mental illness and dealing with it. Now we are speaking of the positive qualities. So if that is your question, then mind also has positive qualities. But if you ask what is the definition of mind, no, there is no
That was not
answer.
the
There is no
question,
one
right?
answer. But she has something.
Just to add that now the most critique of positive psychology is that it focuses too much. There's an overemphasis on positivity. So now the current trend is what we call hedonic neutrality. So not to get too attracted to positive emotions and not to get too repulsed from negative emotions. So that is the current trend currently.
Just one last, the to the what Pragya mentioned was that it's better to create a sound mind rather than heal a broken person. Or the whole shift, even from those who are working in the area of mental health, is not to look at just mental illness, but mental well-being, and a lot more on prevention. So there is a lot of compassion. Obviously, you're starting from a point of love and compassion to say, I'm trying to build where there is already positive rather than demolish and say, this is what you're not good at. Start looking around and say what you are good at. Even in HR, you have the areas of inquiry, which is looking at what are positives in your whole system. So I think there is definitely a lot of shift to more compassion and more love. So yeah, just to say big thanks to our speakers. They walked us through a most interesting and exciting path, varied paths, looking at different aspects of whether it was Indian philosophy, Western philosophy, or the history of philosophy, the timelines, and of course our practitioner who's taught us or showed us how you can get all this into and out there into the field, because that's the most critical part of any education is or any learning is how we're going to move it from classroom to the field. And I think they've done a fantastic job. And once again, apologies if I've deprived you all, the audience, of some knowledge, and the speakers of sharing a lot more of their knowledge. But thank you very much.
It seems that we have come to a very interesting point, but I think we have to stop here, or it might go on for another hour. So
Yes.
I would like to thank all our chairperson and all the speakers for such a wonderfully insightful session. And now I would request Professor Grishwar Mishra, Vice Chancellor, Mahatma Gandhi International Hindi University, to please present the souvenir to our speakers and chairperson. Miss Madhuri Menon. Dr. Vibha Sharma. Dr. Vibha Sharma. Dr. Karan Kumarji. Miss Parisha Jijina. Mr. Anand Chobokswar. Thank you, sir. And we will now leave for the tea recession, and we will resume our fourth session at 4 o'clock, 3:50. Thank you.